In the dimly lit throne room of the ancient Persian capital Persepolis, King Farrokh Yasna sat uncomfortably as his royal scribes read dispatches from the far corners of his realm. The year was 518 BCE, and the mighty Achaemenid Empire stretched from the Indus Valley to the Mediterranean. Farrokh, a fictional composite based on Persian monarchs of the era, embodied the divine authority of kingship as understood in the ancient world. But tonight, something unusual troubled his thoughts. "Read that again," he commanded, leaning forward on his golden throne. "What manner of leadership does this Athenian experiment employ?" The scribe cleared his throat. "Great king, life, prosperity, health, the Athenians have expanded their council to 500 men chosen by lot from all eligible citizens. They call it demokratia, rule by the people." Farrokh scoffed. "And how does this rabble expect to make decisions without a king to guide them? Who commands their armies? Who speaks for their gods?" Such a scene, while imagined, reflects a genuine historical moment, the birth of Athenian democracy under Cleisthenes in 508 BCE, occurring during the height of the Persian Empire under Darius I. The conflict between autocratic and participatory governance was not merely philosophical, it would soon manifest in the Persian Wars, forever altering the trajectory of Western civilization. Throughout history, established power structures have faced disruptive innovations in leadership and governance. These transitions were rarely smooth, often bloody, and invariably transformative. The psychological response of traditional rulers to new methods of organizing human societies offers a fascinating lens through which to understand power dynamics across millennia. In 45 BCE, Julius Caesar stood before the Roman Senate, having recently been named Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. His military genius had transformed Rome's republic into the beginnings of an empire. Yet even Caesar, master of political calculation, failed to recognize how his concentration of power threatened the aristocratic governing class. On March 15, 44 BCE, a conspiracy of senators led by Brutus and Cassius assassinated him, ironically hastening the republic's collapse and the empire's rise under his adopted son Octavian, later Augustus. The Roman Republic's transition to empire demonstrates a crucial historical pattern: leadership innovations often emerge from crisis. The Republic's institutions, designed for a city-state, buckled under the weight of governing a Mediterranean-spanning empire. Caesar's centralization of authority, while viewed as tyrannical by traditionalists, addressed genuine administrative needs that the republican system could not resolve. 2 millennia later, in the 18th century, another revolution in governance would unfold. The American Founding Fathers, drawing on Enlightenment philosophy and classical republicanism, designed a system explicitly rejecting monarchical authority. Their constitutional republic established in 1789 featured radical innovations, separation of powers, federalism, and regular elections, all meant to prevent power concentration. King George III of Britain, watching from across the Atlantic, reportedly dismissed this experiment. When told George Washington would likely resign his command after the Revolutionary War, he stated, "If he does that, he will be the greatest man in the world." The king's astonishment reveals how revolutionary Washington's voluntary relinquishment of power truly was in an age of hereditary rule. The evolution of leadership methods can be traced through specific historical transitions that would have bewildered ancient rulers. Consider China's meritocratic civil service system, established during the Sui dynasty 581 to 618 CE, and perfected during the Tang dynasty 618 to 907 CE. This system selected government officials through competitive examinations rather than aristocratic birth, a radical departure from feudal norms prevalent elsewhere. Emperor Taizong of Tang reigned 626 to 649 CE, though himself a hereditary ruler, embraced this innovation. His willingness to incorporate merit-based selection into an imperial system demonstrates how thoughtful leaders could adapt new methods while maintaining traditional authority structures. The imperial examination system would endure for nearly 1,300 years, becoming one of history's most successful bureaucratic innovations. By contrast, the concept of servant leadership, where authority figures prioritize others' needs above their own, would have seemed incomprehensible to most ancient monarchs. Yet historical examples exist. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor from 161 to 180 CE, whose Stoic philosophy emphasized duty over privilege, wrote in his Meditations, "Remember that what pulls the strings is the force hidden within, there lies the power to persuade, there the life, there, if one must speak out, the real man." The tension between autocratic and consultative leadership styles appears throughout history. In medieval Europe, the Magna Carta of 1215 CE represented a pivotal moment when King John of England was forced to accept constraints on royal power. This document, while primarily protecting aristocratic privileges rather than common citizens, established the revolutionary principle that the monarch was subject to law or not above it. The psychological dimensions of leadership transitions are perhaps best illustrated by the French Revolution. When representatives of the Third Estate declared themselves the National Assembly on June 17, 1789, King Louis XVI initially responded with dismissal, then military intimidation. His inability to comprehend or adapt to emerging democratic pressures ultimately cost him his throne and his head. Leadership methods evolve in response to technological change as well. The invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg around 1440 CE democratized information, undermining the Church's monopoly on knowledge and accelerating the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther's 95 Theses, nailed to the Wittenberg church door in 1517, challenged papal authority and initiated a leadership revolution that would fracture Western Christendom. Pope Leo X's initial dismissal of Luther as a drunken German who will change his mind when sober reflected the established power structure's typical first response to innovation, dismissive disbelief. By the time Catholic leadership recognized the existential threat, the movement had gained unstoppable momentum, permanently altering Europe's religious and political landscape. Economic systems drive leadership innovations as well. The commercial revolution of the Renaissance era saw Italian city-states like Venice and Florence develop republican governments led by merchant oligarchies. Their council-based governance, focused on trade advantage rather than territorial conquest, would have seemed alien to traditional monarchs whose power derived from land ownership and military might. The Venetian Republic, lasting from 697 to 1797 CE, developed sophisticated checks and balances to prevent power concentration, including complex electoral procedures for selecting the Doge, chief magistrate. Though certainly not democratic by modern standards, Venice's system represented a radical departure from hereditary monarchy, one that delivered remarkable stability and prosperity for a millennium. Modern corporate leadership methods would perhaps be most bewildering to ancient rulers. The concept that leadership could be taught rather than inherited contradicts foundational assumptions of traditional kingship. The 20th century saw the emergence of management science, with figures like Peter Drucker advocating systematic approaches to organizational leadership based on measurable outcomes rather than divine right or charismatic authority. The stakeholder model of corporate governance, considering interests beyond shareholders to include employees, customers, communities, and environment, echoes ancient wisdom while applying it in revolutionary ways. Hammurabi's Code, circa 1754 BCE, contained provisions protecting various social classes, but the notion that leadership legitimacy derives from serving multiple constituencies represents a profound evolution. Digital age leadership presents further innovations. Distributed authority in open-source projects, blockchain governance, and networked organizations challenge hierarchical models. The rise of servant leadership, transformational leadership, and adaptive leadership theories all emphasize flexibility over rigid authority, concepts that would have seemed dangerous to traditional rulers whose power depended on projecting unchanging strength. The historical arc bends toward increasingly participatory leadership models, but not in a simple linear progression. Autocratic reversals occur regularly. The Roman Republic gave way to imperial rule. The democratic experiments of ancient Greece succumbed to Macedonian domination. The 20th century witnessed democratic systems collapsing into fascism and totalitarianism. Judge Florence Yates, presiding over a modern corporate governance case in 2018, observed that power structures reinvent themselves with remarkable adaptability. The divine right of kings becomes the divine right of CEOs, or algorithms, or whoever holds authority in each era. Her observation captures how leadership methods evolve while power dynamics often remain recognizable across millennia. What lessons can we derive from this historical overview? First, leadership innovations succeed when they solve genuine problems within their context. Athens developed democracy partly to prevent the return of tyranny under figures like Persepolis, who had seized power multiple times in the 6th century BCE. The American constitutional system emerged from specific grievances against British colonial administration. Second, hybrid systems often prove more durable than pure innovations. Emperor Constantine's adoption of Christianity in the 4th century CE represented not a complete religious revolution but a syncretism that preserved imperial authority while accommodating changing religious sensibilities. The British constitutional monarchy evolved gradually, maintaining traditional symbols while transferring actual governance to democratic institutions. Third, information technology consistently democratizes leadership. From the printing press to social media, innovations that decentralize communication invariably challenge established authorities. When Johannes Gutenberg invented movable type printing around 1440 CE, he could not have predicted how his technology would undermine the Catholic Church's authority, enable the Protestant Reformation, and ultimately contribute to the Enlightenment's revolutionary ideas. Fourth, leadership transitions often occur when established systems fail to address emerging complexity. The feudal system provided security in the chaotic aftermath of the Western Roman Empire's collapse but proved inadequate for governing increasingly sophisticated medieval economies. Similarly, industrial age hierarchical management struggles with knowledge economy challenges requiring innovation and adaptability. Yanel Kasparov, a leadership historian at Oxford University, notes, "What we consider revolutionary today often has historical antecedents. Athenian democracy, Roman republican institutions, Chinese meritocracy, and indigenous consensus building all anticipated elements of modern governance. The true innovation lies in how these methods are adapted to contemporary scale and complexity." Perhaps the most significant shift in leadership methodology involves the source of legitimacy. Ancient rulers claimed divine mandate, the Egyptian pharaohs were considered living gods, Mesopotamian kings ruled as divine representatives, and European monarchs claimed the divine right of kings. By contrast, modern leadership derives legitimacy from measurable outcomes, constituent consent, or adherence to established processes. This transition accelerated during the Enlightenment. When the American Declaration of Independence stated that governments derived their just powers from the consent of the governed, it represented a fundamental break with traditional authority sources. The French Revolution's Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, 1789, similarly proclaimed that law is the expression of the general will, not royal decree. Modern corporate leadership has evolved analogous accountability mechanisms. The rise of environmental, social, and governance (ESG) metrics in the 21st century resembles a secular version of divine judgment. Leaders are evaluated against external standards rather than ruling by inherent right. Performance-based compensation, once unthinkable for divinely appointed rulers, now dominates executive incentive structures. The psychological resistance of traditional leaders to innovation follows predictable patterns across history. Initial dismissal gives way to active opposition, followed eventually by selective adaptation. Emperor Constantine did not abandon Roman imperial authority when embracing Christianity in the 4th century CE. He incorporated the new religion into existing power structures, eventually positioning himself as leader of the First Council of Nicaea in 325 CE. Similarly, Japanese Emperor Meiji did not relinquish imperial status during the Meiji Restoration, 1868, but instead adapted Western modernization within Japanese cultural frameworks. The emperor remained a symbolic authority while Japan rapidly industrialized, demonstrating how traditional leadership can selectively incorporate innovation without complete displacement. Perhaps the most relevant historical parallel for modern leadership challenges lies in periods of paradigm shift, moments when fundamental assumptions about authority transform. The transition from medieval to early modern European governance witnessed the rise of nation-states replacing feudal allegiances. Authority shifted from personal fealty to institutional loyalty, anticipating modern organizational commitment. Farrokh Yasna, our fictional Persian king contemplating Athenian democracy, could not have envisioned modern corporate boards, 360-degree feedback evaluations, or servant leadership principles. Yet the fundamental questions he faced remain relevant. What makes leadership legitimate? How is authority best exercised? What balance between individual vision and collective wisdom produces optimal outcomes? The nervous discomfort of ancient kings confronting novel leadership methods mirrors contemporary reactions to disruption. Traditional hierarchies in business, government, religion, and education all face challenges from networked alternatives. Centralized authority struggles against distributed expertise. Command structures compete with collaborative systems. The psychological tension between control and adaptation defines leadership transitions throughout history. What would Emperor Augustus make of a modern corporate restructuring? How would Hammurabi view shareholder activism? What might Queen Elizabeth I think of agile management methodologies? The historical distance highlights how profoundly leadership assumptions have evolved, yet also how consistent human responses to authority remain across centuries. The enduring lesson from these historical transitions is that leadership effectiveness ultimately depends on appropriateness to context. The divine king model functioned within specific religious and social frameworks. Republican governance emerged from particular economic and philosophical conditions. Modern distributed leadership responds to information age realities that previous eras could not imagine. As we navigate contemporary leadership challenges, from corporate governance to global coordination, historical awareness offers both humility and inspiration. The nervous ancient kings watching democracy emerge, the aristocrats witnessing commercial republics flourish, and the traditional authorities confronting information revolutions all remind us that leadership methods continually evolve. What seems radical today may become conventional tomorrow. What appears eternal may prove transitory. The true wisdom of history lies not in specific leadership methods but in understanding the process of adaptation itself, how societies transform authority structures to address emerging challenges while preserving valuable traditions. In that ongoing negotiation between innovation and continuity, between individual vision and collective wisdom, we find the essential dynamic of leadership across all historical eras.